light in deep darkness. It's what we want. It's what we need. It's one of the reasons we hang lights at Christmas and light candles, especially in the northern hemisphere, especially in December. The suggestion of light in the darkness that comes from our favorite December prophet is all well and good. We know what to do with that. We write songs about it and sing songs about it because it's what we want. It's what we need. But this evening, Isaiah continued to speak. And he had some strange and wondrous things to say. And frankly, we're not sure what to do with the rest of Isaiah's words. Because we don't imagine ourselves particularly oppressed. And the idea of bloody garments and combat boots being used as fire starter is, to be honest, not what we want to think about tonight. But Isaiah is the herald of something new, as sure as the angels are heralds of something new. And Isaiah's offering us a complex and occasionally alarming vision of what God's renewal and rescue looks like. And because our world is complicated, and because our relationships with God, with creation, and with one another are complex, it is important that we hear these strange words from Isaiah chapter 9. Because God's promised deliverance is not a promise to go back to the good old days. Nor is it a promise of pie in the sky when you die by and by. God will save us. God is saving us from all kinds of evil at every turn. But most importantly for Isaiah, God is saving us from ourselves. God's promised redemption would free us from our bondage to old ideas and lazy thinking, where our relationship to global conflict and real justice and goodwill to all is concerned. And so Isaiah's announcement of the new thing that is coming starts with the unexpected, and with a reminder that God can and will work from the midst of all that has gone wrong. The remnant of our conflicts, the memory of our wrong-headedness, all these things and more are bound for the burning barrel, for a fire that will generate heat and light where it is most needed. So tonight our Christmas story doesn't start with angels. We'll get there. Nor does it start with the surprising reaction of an expectant mother. We'll get there too. Shepherds singing in the streets, they're coming. But instead, tonight our story starts with light in the darkness and the promise of peace in the midst of conflict. An ancient promise that is fresh for every generation. A hope that never fades, and a story that never gets old. Christmas is a story of a tyrant's decree that created chaos for the mass of people who lived under his rule. Tens of thousands, perhaps, we don't really know, are displaced by that royal order that comes when Quirinius was the governor of Syria. Return to your ancestral homes that you might be counted and taxed. And yes, there are some in this story for whom it's no hardship. They've never strayed more than a couple of 100 yards from their family home. So the only hardship coming to them is the tax that will result in this counting. But for too many, especially if you wanted to stay on the right side of the law, this decree means an enforced journey full of anxiety and uncertainty, with little hope of anything like a happy homecoming. And in Luke's gospel, we are told that that is certainly the case for Mary and Joseph, who will be among many visitors in an overcrowded town, may be able to stay with family whose hospitality has already been stretched to the limit. Yes, you can stay with us, sure, absolutely, but you're in the stable. It was a long, uncomfortable journey home, hardly peaceful, charged with chaos, full of uncertainty and worry, and it is a trip that ends with a birth in the most unlikely of places. I think on this whenever stories of challenging holiday travels are shared. And Lord knows there will be a plethora of challenging holiday travel stories to be shared this year. I think on this because God's story, whatever else we think about it, does not begin in Bethlehem. While the Christian church has aligned its liturgical calendar to count this as the beginning of a new year, God's story doesn't start here. God's story is always in the process of being told for generations, for thousands of years. God's story has been unfolding in the lives of human beings everywhere. God's story does not start with Jesus in a manger. But it does take a very human twist with this particular birth, in this particular place, at this particular time. And I think it's significant that the twist in this story that God tells amongst God's people, that this story involves struggling parents who are just barely getting by. And it involves supernatural birth announcements in several different places, especially the one offered to folks who rarely find themselves invited to celebrations of this kind. In this particular part of God's story, the highest call out to the lowest. And I am reminded that this is how God chooses to intervene. That these people, the pregnant mother, the unhappy couple, the miserable shepherds, the stragglers, and the misfits, these are the people entrusted with the holy and wonderful news. These are the people to whom the angel says it's good news of great joy for all people. And it is given first to those who least expect it, and in some minds, least deserve it. It is given to those who never dreamt of being included in something so wonderful, so joyful, so full of hope and love and life. We have turned Christmas into a shimmering pageant of excess. And I don't offer any apologies for that. It's a wonderful thing to celebrate. But we too easily forget the humble, even rustic origins of this holy event. And I think on these things when my mind drifts to what is waiting for me under the tree, or on the table, or around a fire. Our first world Christmases are wonderful and joyful and sometimes even holy moments. But the truth of what this twist in God's story means for the world is broader and more alarming and more wonderful than we could even imagine. Because the embodiment of God's goodness and grace finds a home in the most ordinary of places, among scattered, anxious, displaced, and dismissed persons. The first Christmas is an act of God for all the people of God in the least likely of God's places. And I wonder tonight what you might think of that.